Oh boy, I mean, if you had told me at the beginning of the season that the Kraken and the Predators would be the third and fourth team eliminated from playoff contention, I would have doubted you so much. But here we are. We're back with another offseason preview video, and in today's video we're discussing the Nashville Predators and Seattle Kraken. We'll get to all of the details about what they've done this year and what they could be looking forward to in the offseason coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Before we begin this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below and don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below. It really does help with the channel. So in today's video, we got another offseason preview video. I already did my first, and you can go check it out. I'll leave the link to it up in the YouTube cards, talking about the Sharks and the Blackhawks, the first two teams eliminated. Well, now we're going to be looking at the next two teams who are eliminated, and that is the Seattle Kraken and the Nashville Predators. So as I talked about in that last video, in these types of videos, I'm basically going to break down their season so far at the recording of this video, see their highest goal scorers, what their power play, goals for, goals against are, and what reasons I think they wound up missing the playoffs for. We're going to look at their UFAs, RFAs, and draft capital for this upcoming offseason, and then I'm going to give you 5 ways I think the Predators or Kraken should approach this offseason to try and get better so they can maybe be playoff teams next year. So we're going to start off with the first team who was eliminated out of these two, and that was the Nashville Predators. The Predators are basically locked in as the third lowest team in the NHL this year. They have been atrocious, which is not something I was expecting. When I did my playoff preview videos in the preseason, I was expecting Nashville to be a top 3 team, maybe even top 2 team in the Central Division. That is nowhere close to what this team has done. Marchessault, Stamkos, Shea, Wedgwood never really fit in the way I think Nashville was hoping for, and that entire team just never really clicked this year. So this Predators team hasn't been doing great. If you look at the team's goal scoring and point scoring leaders, their top 3 goal scorers are Forsberg, Stamkos, and Marchessault. So like I said, Stamkos and Marchessault haven't had awful seasons, but just not to the production that the Predators were hoping for. Forsberg leads the team with 29 goals, Stamkos has 25, and Marchessault has 19. All 3 of those guys were 40 goal scorers last year. So given that fact, you can definitely see why the Predators are definitely a little bit lower in the spectrum than a lot of people thought they would be. If you look at their point scoring players, Forsberg, no surprise, leads the team in points, 70 points, almost another point per game season there for Forsberg. I'm not sure if he'll wind up hitting it with how many games left in the season, but he's once again been fantastic for Nashville. Marchessault second in the team with 49 points, so he'll probably hit the 50 plateau, and Stamkos is third with 47 points. He'll also probably hit the 50 plateau. So interesting note there, this team didn't have very many 50-point players at this point in time. They don't. So interesting note there, but you can see the top 3 point scoring are seen as the top 3 in goal scoring with Stamkos, Marchessault, and Forsberg. So interesting note there. This team has not been overly great. They have a 27-42-8 record as of the recording of this video. So 15 games below 500 is not overly great. If you look at their goal scoring, you can see that this is probably the main reason as to why this team's doing so bad. We talked about the Sharks, we talked about the Hawks. They were a little bit better than the Predators in goal scoring, and that's saying something. The Predators, as of the recording of this video, have 191 goals for. That's good enough for dead last in the NHL. They are 32nd when it comes to goals for per game in the NHL. It's not worked out overly well for the Predators offensively. Defensively, they've been mediocre. It's subpar, definitely. It's in the lower half of the league, but it's not as bad as the goal scoring. They've given up 252 goals against, which is good enough for 25th in the NHL if we go by goals against per game. So once again, defense is a lot better than their offense right now, and defense is absolutely dried up in Nashville. If you look at their power play and PK percentage, it's not overly bad, definitely not as atrocious as the goals against or goals for as right now, but it's still not overly great. Their power play is running at a 20.6% power play unit, which isn't overly bad. It's tied for 19th in the NHL, so just a tiny bit below average, which isn't overly bad. I mean, if you have a 20% power play unit, you're doing pretty good, so that's not overly bad. And their penalty kill is also not atrocious either. They have an 81% PK, which is good enough for being tied for 9th in the NHL at this point in time. So PK is actually done quite good. Goals against is doing a lot better than goals for, and their power play is running at around average. So not atrocious season, but I think the big downfall this team has, they haven't gotten the defense they've been used to getting, and that offense has just been non-existent. So those are the stats for Predators right now. 3 reasons I think this team missed the playoffs this year. One was, like I just talked about, that non-existent goal scoring. They brought in Marchessault, they brought in Stamkos, they brought in a couple of of other guys to sort of round out that team. They were really hoping that those guys could repeat 40-goal performances. The guys around him, like Nyquist, could have a replica of last year. O'Reilly could be a really good second-line center for that team. And this team could really gel well together and produce some more scoring, which has a little bit of a problem for this team dating back to a couple of years ago. But it never worked out. The goal scoring was not there. They had to trade off a couple of pieces like a Nyquist, like a Thomas Novak, who weren't having overly great seasons at the trade deadline. So the non-existent goal scoring, the fact that they are dead last in the NHL, worse than Chicago and San Jose in goal scoring, is a big testament as to why this team is currently missing the playoffs for the first time in a couple of years. Next is the fact that their high-priced off-season additions haven't worked out to the best of their abilities. Marchessault, Stamkos, Shea, and Wedgwood were their 4 big off-season additions. Those were the premium guys this team went out. They paid a whole bunch of money for Shea, for Marchessault, for Stamkos, Wedgwood to some extent a little bit less, but still. Those 4 were their big off-season additions, and they have not done very good for the Nashville Predators. Stamkos, Marchessault, they're still producing really good, but going from like 70 to 80 point players putting up 40 goals to having 50, 55 point seasons where they're having like between 20 and 30 goals, that's a big step back from where they were with Vegas and Tampa respectively last year. So those two haven't done well. Shea, he's been alright, but he hasn't been the sort of offensive powerhouse he was in Carolina the past couple of years. And Wedgwood started out pretty badly, and then he went to Colorado, where he's actually found quite a good game. So given those facts, Wedgwood, Shea, Stamkos, and Marchessault not fitting in, I think, is the best of what the Predators were hoping for, is a major reason as to why this team is not in the playoff spot. And the last one was because of Roman Josi. Josi missed a whole bunch of time this year due to injury. I think he's missed like between 15 and 20 games at this point. Josi is that team's best defenseman. You take him off of that blue line, that creates a massive hole. Now, I think he's already gone back into game action. He's still playing with the Predators at this point in time. But the fact that Josi missed so much time due to injury, and that blue line, if Josi's not on it right now, is really, really weak, I think was another major reason as to why this Predators team is on the outside looking in this year. So in my opinion, the fact that this team had no goal scoring whatsoever, the fact that their big offseason additions didn't fit in well like they wanted to, and the fact that Josi was injured for a couple of games this year were, I think, the 3 main reasons this team wound up missing the playoffs this year. Next, going over to the UFAs, significant pending RFAs, and draft capital. So if you look at their UFAs and RFAs, there's not a lot of players here that are on expiring deals. On the UFA side, you've got Jacob Vrana, Kiefer Bellows, Gregory Denisenko, Mark Delgazio, Andreas Englund, and Mark Friedman. Now, Englund, Friedman on the defensive end were both in-season acquisitions. Friedman in a low-end trade. Englund was claimed off of waivers. Both don't have a whole bunch of games action this year. Englund has 2 points in 29 games. Friedman, no points in 5. I think they were just to sort of provide some depth in case they ran into some injuries. I would not be surprised if they were not brought back. Delgazio has 8 points in 39 games this year. He's actually quite a young defenseman. I think he's a Group 6 UFA, so I wouldn't be surprised if the Predators brought him back on like a 1 to 2 year deal, maybe on the cheaper side of things. Then you got Gregory Denisenko, who was traded for future considerations from Vegas. You got Jacob Vrana, who was claimed off of waivers from Washington, and you got Kiefer Bellows, who has been playing over in the AHL over the past couple of years. So all of those guys did get into some NHL action. Denisenko 1 game, Bellows 17 games with 4 points, and Vrana 33 games with 13 points, but most of those were with the Washington Capitals. So those are all bottom 6 options. I would not be surprised if none of those guys were wound up being brought back by Nashville. Maybe a guy like Denisenko could be brought back as like a depth call-up option, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Preds walked away from most of these UFAs. If you look at their RFAs, they got 4 really interesting RFAs. That's Luke Evangelista, Jesse Alonen, Andre Pavel, and Magnus Corona. Corona was acquired in the Askarov deal last offseason. He's still more of an AHL goaltender at this point, probably will try and be a third stringer next year, so I wouldn't be surprised if the Preds brought him back. I think eventually he could be a backup. You got Andre Pavel, who they acquired in the Parsonen deal, and Jesse Alonen, who they acquired in a minor league swap. Both are decent AHLers at this point in time, might be call-up options. Wouldn't be surprised if the Predators didn't give them qualifying offers, but also wouldn't be surprised if the Predators re-sign them on like short-term deals. The one big RFA they have to deal with is Luke Evangelista. So far this year hasn't had a great season, but it's done all right, putting up 9 goals and 27 points in 61 games. Had a little bit of injury troubles this year, but he's a really good forward. I think he fits long-term in that top 9, so I would not be one bit surprised if Evangelista was brought back by Nashville. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but those are their big RFAs, and I think Evangelista definitely headlines those RFAs. Next, going over to their draft capital. The Predators draft capital for a 2025 season is actually quite a lot. They currently have 10 picks in this upcoming year's draft. In the first round, they have their own, plus the Tampa Bay Lightning and Vegas Golden Knights first round picks. They have their own and the Bolts second round picks. They have their own third, their own fourth, their own fifth, their own sixth, along with the Avalanche's sixth round pick for this year, and they have no seventh round picks. So 10 picks is 3 more than what you'd expect an average team to have on their draft capital, so that's a lot. 5 picks in the first 2 rounds, including 3 picks in the first round, is outstanding. So they're going to have a chance to get a whole bunch of really good players, and if they really want to try and retool this team, maybe they could try and move one of those first round picks to get some sort of help on the forward group or on the defensive end. So interesting note there, but the Predators have quite a bit of draft capital, actually more than the Hawks and the Sharks do. So interesting note there. And lastly, going over to 5 things I think this Predators team should do this offseason to improve for next year. So first, I think, just like I talked about, move one of their first round picks for a roster upgrade. Now this team still has a lot of veterans on this team. I don't think they'll go through a full rebuild right now. I don't think that's the plan. They just signed Saros to a long-term extension. They have veterans like Josi, Forsberg, Marchessault. So I think they really do want to try and keep this team, maybe just go on like a short 1 to 2 year retool and try and rebuild this team back up. And I think moving one of those first round picks would be a smart idea. Like the Bolts and the Knights both look pretty good. I think there's a very likely chance those picks will be maybe around like the 20 to 25 mark, unless one of them goes to the Stanley Cup final. So I definitely think there's a very likely chance that if they're both in like the 20 to 25 area, that there's a very likely chance that the Predators do end up moving one of them, because I think they already have a lot of draft capital for this year. If they moved a first round pick and maybe a couple of other things to try and get like maybe a really stellar level forward upgrade, like part of me wonders maybe to try and go after like a guy like Trevor Zegras or maybe Chris Kreider or something like that to try and help them get some scoring into this team. I think that would be a smart move for Nashville. So keep your eye on the Predators going and moving one of those first rounds, whether it be Bolts or the Knights. Try and get some upgrade on the team. Next, I think they have to consider moving some of the veterans. Now, most of these guys are going to be entering the final year of their deals. If the Predators do not feel that they're going to be a playoff team next year, I definitely think that they should consider moving these guys. That's Jeremy Lauzon, Colton Sissons, and Michael Bunting. All will be entering the final year of their deals this offseason. Bunting has been a decent middle six forward. He was acquired at the trade deadline. Fit in quite well, but if they don't feel like they're going to be a playoff team, I wouldn't be surprised if he was moved. Jeremy Lauzon, former leader for hits in a single season. A really good player, solid third pair guy, can really lay the body down. So if there was a good enough offer, I wouldn't be shocked if the Predators moved him. Colton Sissons, he's been a long-time Nashville Predators player, really solid bottom six guy, can play really well in like the third line. And with him entering the final year of his deal, he's on a very cheap cap hit. I would not be surprised if the Predators will be open to moving him. So I think they consider moving some of those vets. Also wouldn't be surprised if they consider moving a Steven Stamkos or Jonathan Marchessault. Stamkos has 3 years left after this year, $8 million. Marchessault has 4 years left after this year at $5.5 million. So Marchessault's a little bit cheaper. He's fitting quite well, has a couple more points than Stamkos does. Wouldn't be surprised if they try to keep him more than Stamkos. But I think there's a very likely chance that if they really do want to move off one more of these veterans, that one of those two, Stamkos and Marchessault, will get moved. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. Next, just like the Sharks, just like the Hawks we talked about in our last video, let some of these younger players continue to grow and play in significant roles. Like on the forward group, you got Matthew Wood, Fedor Svechkov, Zachary Leroux, Joakim Kamel, and Reed Schaefer, who are all really good forward prospects, and I do feel like could wind up playing into a role on Nashville next year. That's more of a training camp issue, but still, I think having some spots open for younger players to play would be a smart move there for Nashville. The next one I think that the Nashville Predators should do this offseason is add a top 4 defenseman. This decor, while it hasn't been the worst, is not overly great decor, and even though Saros is a solid goaltender, it hasn't worked out in Nashville this year. So I feel like if they could add another solid top 4 defenseman to this team, maybe someone who can play with Roman Josi or like man the second D pair, I think that would be a smart move there for Nashville. Not sure who they could go after, if it was like free agency going after a guy like Ivan Provorov, or if it was in the trade market going after a guy like Andre Miller. Not exactly sure who they'll try and target, but adding a top 4 defenseman should be a top priority. And lastly is adding 1 to 2 young top 9 forwards. Now I think this team could definitely use a little bit more youth, and like I do think that they need to bring in some of their rookies. I do think maybe adding some more established NHL players who are on the younger side of things would also be a smart move. So whether that's adding a younger free agent who's maybe only like 27, 28 years old, or going out and moving some of that draft capital which we talked about for a solid young top 9 forward, I think that's another thing the Nashville Predators could do, because I think this team really needs some scoring help, and if they they could add some already established younger NHL players to help this team scoring, I think that would be a smart move. So those are the 5 things that I think the Nashville Predators should do in the offseason to try and get better for next year, and that's the Nashville Predators as it's right now. Meanwhile, going over to the Seattle Kraken. So when you go over to the Seattle Kraken, we're going to start off as we usually do by looking at their top 3 goal and top 3 point getters. So if you look at their goal scorers, they have 3 players currently over 20 goals. That's James Schwartz, who's had a very good resurgence this year, having 24 goals. Eli Tolvanen, who has 22 goals, and Jared McCann, who has 20 goals. So all those 3 guys you'd expect to be on the top end of their goal scoring charts. Meanwhile, if you look at their point scoring players, Jared McCann has 58 points. He's currently their point scoring leader. He's followed by Chandler Stevenson, offseason acquisition from last year, who has 50 points, and James Schwartz, who has 47 points to go along with his team leading 24 goals. So all in all, the Kraken do have a couple decent offensive weapons. They're not as bad goal scoring wise as a team like the Nashville Predators, but they're not the best either. So definitely, I mean, you want to see them have at least a couple 60, 70 point players, and they don't have any of them right now. So that's interesting out there for Seattle. This team's not overly great. They're definitely not as bad as Nashville, don't get me wrong. They have a 33-30-6 record right now. So they're only 5 games below 500, but still, it's not overly great and not enough to get themselves in a playoff spot right now. So if you look at their goals for, goals against, goals for, they scored 233 goals, which is actually good enough, goals for per game wise, for 14th in the NHL. So they're actually in the top half of the league goal scoring wise, which is not too bad. Like, they've actually gotten quite a lot of points this year from their defense, like Dunn, Montour, and some of those other guys, as well as some of their bottom 6 help. They do still have a lot of distributed goal scoring, so they're not going to have one big goal scorer, but they do have a lot of guys contributing right now, which is why they are one of the top teams in the goal scoring category. Well, in the goals against category, if you go by goals against per game, they have 243 goals against at this point in time, which is good enough for 22nd in the NHL. So it's still a better defense than the Predators do have, but it's not in the top half of the league like their offense is. So definitely, I think their subpar defensive play has been something to watch for as to why this team missed the playoffs this year. But their goal scoring, while it hasn't been the best, has been all right for the Seattle Kraken. If you look at their power play and PK unit for this year, both are in the bottom half of the league. Their power play is running at 18.2%, and that is good enough for 26th in the NHL. So their power play in the very bottom half of the league, almost in the last quarter. So that's not overly great. Their power play definitely needs to improve. If you look at their PK, they're running at 77.8%, which is good enough for 18th. So it's not atrocious, but it is not in the top half of the league. So you gotta think that changes have to be coming to try and improve their special teams, because the power play running at 26% and the PK running at 18% is not overly great for Seattle. So 3 reasons I think this team wound up missing the playoffs this year was: 1, bad play from Grubauer. Grubauer still haunts the Seattle Kraken. I think he might have been the worst free agent signing the Kraken made during that first year, because Burakovsky hasn't been overly great. He hasn't been atrocious. Schwartz is proving he can be a really solid player this year, but that Grubauer contract is not looking good. The court's come into his own. He's looking really good. He just signed a 5-year contract this year, so they got the starting goaltender, but Grubauer starting to become a liability. I don't think in his career in Seattle, he's had a plus 900 save percentage, so it's not working out with Seattle. I would not be one bit surprised if Grubauer was moved on in the offseason. So the bad play from Grubauer is one of the reasons why I think this Kraken team did not make the playoffs this year. 2 was not having a true goal scoring forward. Like, this team, like I said, has a lot of distributed goal scoring. Like, they can get scoring from wherever they have in their lineup, but they don't have that one superstar goal scorer. Like, a lot of teams do have that one superstar guy, or the 2 or 3 superstar guys who can consistently put up 70 to 80 to 90 points. The Kraken don't have that, and I think that does really hurt them at this point in time. So not having that one scoring option that's always lethal on the ice is a big reason as to why this Kraken team went up missing the playoffs. And this third was subpar special teams, like I just talked about. Power play has not been overly good. Their penalty kills running at under 80%, which is not overly good. So the subpar special teams that has them in the bottom half of the league in both categories, I think is another major reason as to why this Kraken. They had a better power play percentage and had the goal scoring up a little bit higher, maybe this team would be in the contention for a playoff spot right now instead of being eliminated. So those were the 3 things that I think cost Seattle a playoff spot: the bad play from Grubauer, not having a star level goal scorer, and the fact that this team had subpar special teams. So interesting note there. Next, going over to our significant pending UFAs, significant pending RFAs, and draft capital for this upcoming season. So if you look at their significant pending UFAs, they have a couple here. They have Michael Eyssimont, John Hayden, Luke Henman, Josh Mahura, Cale Fleury, Max Lajoie, Dubois, Gustav Olofsson, and Alex Steska. Steska came up once Grubauer was sent down and placed on waivers, gone to one game, lost that game, had an .864 save percentage, 3.09 JA, was a call-in from Europe. I don't think he's suited to be the backup right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if he stuck around, maybe like a 1 or 2 year deal to be a third stringer. If you look at their defense, it's a whole bunch of players who are like 6th, 7th defensemen. You have Gustav Olofsson, Max Lajoie, who didn't get into any NHL action this year. Also Kale Fleury, who had an assist in 13 games, and Josh McGowan, who had 8 assists in 59 games. I wouldn't personally be surprised if all these guys left as UFAs, or maybe 1 or 2 of them stayed on like short-term 1-2 year deals. So I have to wait and see on that. Meanwhile, in the forward group, you have Luke Hedman, who was the Kraken's first ever signing. I wouldn't be surprised if he maybe brought back on like a 1 or 2 year deal. You have John Hayden, who was the call-up option, has 2 points in 16 games. I think he has a very likely chance he gets moved on from. And then you have Michael Eyssimont, who was acquired in the Oliver Bjorkstrand deal. He has 8 goals and 15 points in 71 games. Looked pretty good. Wouldn't be surprised if he was maybe signed on like a 2 year deal to be a sell bomb 6-4 for Seattle, but also wouldn't be overly surprised if he was let go. If you look at their pending RFAs, they have a couple of interesting ones. Actually, a few interesting ones. They have Capo Kakko, who has 14 goals in a career high, 41 points in 73 games. He's fitting quite well on the top 6, playing mainly with a guy like Jaden Schwartz on that top 6 in Seattle, and he's really resurrected his career, so I wouldn't be surprised if the Kraken maybe offered him like a 3 or 4 year deal at around $4 to $5 million, but I think he's definitely staying. You have Ty Karche, who had 5 goals and 10 points in 59 games this year. Really good 4th line forward. Wouldn't be surprised if he got like a 2 to 3 year deal to remain in Seattle. You have Ben Myers, who got into 8 games of NHL action this year, no points, call-up option guy. Wouldn't be surprised if he was let go. Wouldn't be surprised if he was brought back on a short-term deal. And they have their second ever draft selection in Riker Evans. Evans has 5 goals and 25 points in 68 games played. Evans is a really solid third pair defensive prospect right now, and I feel like he should be able to get like a 2 to 3 year deal to remain with Seattle. So a couple of interesting RFAs, including some big ones with guys like Evans, Karche, and Kakko. Meanwhile, if you go over to the draft capital for this upcoming offseason, they do have a couple of draft picks. It's not as much as the last 3 teams we discussed. They currently have 7 picks for this upcoming draft. They have their first round pick, theirs in the Leafs second round pick. They have no third round pick. They have theirs in the Stars 4th round pick. They have their 5th round pick. They have no 6th round pick, and they have their 7th round pick. So they have 7 picks, which is what you expect an average team to have. They have an extra 2nd round pick, so they have 3 picks in the first 2 rounds. That's not too bad. They have 5 picks in the first 4 rounds. That's not too bad. So interesting out there, but the Kraken have a pretty decent draft capital. And lastly, going over to 5 things I think this Kraken team should do in the offseason to get better for next year. So first thing, as we talked about in our why they missed the playoffs, Grubauer's been atrocious. That contract has not worked out for the Seattle Kraken. Of course, their goalie going forward now, they don't need to keep Grubauer anymore. So I think whether it's being bought out, even if they have to have some decent cap penalty, or whether they are able to find a taker and move him via trade, I think they really need to get rid of Grubauer and find someone to be the backup this year. So I'm not exactly sure how they'll make that work, but I think that has to be top priority because Grubauer's poor play has cost this team too much in the past. And I think if they were able to move him with maybe some retained salary or a sweetener or buy him out, whatever way it works, I think they really need to move on from Grubauer. That's the first thing. The second thing is also moving some other veterans. They have Jamie Oleksiak, Andrei Burakovsky. I think both are going to be entering the final year of their deals. Burakovsky might have 1 more year left on his deal. Both have been decent players. I think Burakovsky was one of their first free agent signings. Oleksiak was an original draft pick in the expansion draft from Dallas. Both have been decent players. Burakovsky, decent third line guy. Oleksiak's been a really solid powerhouse guy on the second pair. So I would not be overly surprised if maybe they do consider keeping these guys, but I would also not be surprised if the returns were good enough that we could see Burakovsky and or Oleksiak get moved, especially if it was for really good returns, like either someone else who can fill on the roster or something else. So interesting out there, but I think Oleksiak and Burakovsky being moved is a potentiality that the Kraken should consider. Third is just like the Preds, just like the Sharks, just like the Hawks, get some more younger players into this lineup. Guys like Furcus, Chalet, Nyman, or Catan should all have shots this year in training camp to play at the NHL level. This team is loaded with mid-level prospects who I think could eventually be like 3rd, 2nd line forwards or like 4 or 5 defensemen. So I definitely think some of these guys should get chances to play on the team next year. I'm not exactly sure how many prospects they'll play, but like they call up Yanni Nyman and he's been one of the best players over the past couple of weeks. So I think Nyman, Chalet, Catan, who are both former first-round picks. Furcus, who's been a really solid prospect. Should all have chances, plus a couple of other guys too. So adding some more youth into this team, I think, will be a really smart move there for Seattle. Fourth is that I think they should add 1 to 2 top 9 forwards. Like I said, this team could probably use a couple more solid forwards, maybe even one that's like that trigger man that they should go for. I'm not exactly sure who they could try and target because they don't have a whole bunch of draft capital for this year. The next couple of years, I think they do have a couple more draft picks, but I definitely think that if they were to move maybe a couple of picks or maybe even some of their young prospects for a solid top 9 forward or go into free agency and add someone, I think that should be a smart move there for the Kraken to try and do. And the last thing I think they should do is consider signing Jane Schwartz and Ellie Tolvanen into the extensions. Both guys are entering the final year of their deals, I think, but those two are both in the top 3. They're actually their top 2 goal scorers right now, and with this team probably needing to add some more goal scoring, I think keeping those two would be a smart move. Tolvanen, since arriving in Seattle, has been a phenomenal addition, so if they were signed to like a longer term extension, I would not be one bit surprised. Meanwhile, Jane Schwartz, he's on the older side of things. I wouldn't be overly surprised if they maybe signed to like a 1 to 2 year deal, but with the way he's played since Kako got there and the way he's helped Kako become a really lethal player, I think this team should really try and sign Schwartz to like a shorter term extension. So interesting out there, but those are the 5 things I think the Kraken should do this offseason to try and improve for the future. So definitely, that's all I'm going to talk for today. What was your opinion on the Seattle Kraken, the Nashville Predators? Are you surprised that these two teams were 3rd and 4th team eliminated? Were you like me, expecting the Predators to be a top 2 team in the Central, the Kraken to potentially be a wildcard team? And if so, are you surprised that this team's wound up missing the playoffs and were eliminated so early on? So definitely let your guys' thoughts on all this down in the comment section below, and what you think these two teams should do in the offseason. Definitely let your guys' thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk for today. Remember to like this video, and for the to subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never do this without you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to comment down in the comment section below, seeing all the discussed in today's video. Also, a blog, comment, news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that, so check that out. I've linked that down in the description below. Can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.